Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S IAS.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 14th of December 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion.
Dear students, RAU'S IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 is a complete testing and revision course for the upcoming prelims examination. The program will help you prepare for UPSC prelims through a step-up approach. It is a meticulously designed study plan to organize your preparation and keep you on track towards covering the prelims GS and CSAT syllabus extensively from NCERT to the advanced level. The goal of our Prelims Test Series 2021 program is to exhaustively cover all standard sources of study material, including NCERT, with a study plan to test you at par with UPSC level of questions, thereby improving your chances of clearing the prelims examination. To give multiple revision of the entire syllabus from the perspective of civil service prelims pattern, the test series program will also give you the final revision of all topics and themes before the examination through QIP videos and prelims compass notes. The QIP videos or Quality Improvement Program videos are for speedy revision of all important topics for the upcoming prelims examination. QIP videos are kind of crash course for the prelims examination. And prelims compass are 8 subject-wise prelims compilation of all static and current affair topics important for the upcoming prelims. RAU'S IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 will include topics test, testing the concept of candidate. It will include thematic test on both the concept and the current affair of that particular theme. It will also include current affair tests covering the monthly current affairs. And there will be full-length test before the final exam to simulate you for the D-Day. There is a link in the description of this video. You can click on the link for registration and to also check out the demo QIP videos.
So the first news which we have taken appears on page number 9. Connectivity, infrastructure, key points in Modi Hasina summit. Now this news is extremely important from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains examination. If you look at the syllabus of GS2, it says India and its neighborhood relations. Now, of course, we know that Bangladesh is one of the very important neighbors of our country. Important for 2 reasons. First is that India shares the longest land borders with Bangladesh among all its neighbors. So that is importance number 1, and importance number 2 comes from the fact that India right now is going through a pretty bad phase as far as its relation with its neighbors are concerned. We are in bad terms with Pakistan, of course with China, with Nepal, and out of all the neighbors, the friendliest one are Bhutan and Bangladesh. Bangladesh being a large country and quite supportive government in power in Dhaka. It is important for us to know various perspectives with respect to India-Bangladesh relations. And so in this discussion, we learned the nuances of India-Bangladesh relations, but we'll also see how you can apply the same model to cover India's bilateral relation with any other country. Then of course, we will finally learn various issues in various fields written in red color. So let us now begin the discussion. Okay, so let us now begin the discussion by first understanding a little bit of historical context. We all know the role played by India, or the key role played by India in the freedom of Bangladesh or bifurcation of Pakistan. And of course, India became the first country, not the one of the first, but the first country to recognize Bangladesh as a separate state or an independent state and established diplomatic relations with the country immediately the night of its independence in December 1971. Now, since then, the relationship between Bangladesh and India have seen quite ups and downs, but in last 10 years, that is from 2009, when the current government of Sheikh Hasina came into power, the relationship has mostly seen an upswing. That, of course, is demonstrated by various high-level visits and exchanges at various occasions in past 10 years. But apart from that, India and Bangladesh have coordinated extensively on security and border management. So as we have already discussed, India and Bangladesh share 4,096 kilometers of border, which is the longest border that India shares with any of its neighbors. And it's not like that this border was devoid of any dispute. We had disputes regarding land boundary as well as maritime boundary. But both the disputes were settled through agreements. We know that India-Bangladesh land boundary agreement came into force following the exchange of instruments of ratification in June 2015. And in July, the enclaves of India and Bangladesh in each other's countries were exchanged and strip maps were signed. So that was in 2015. Similarly, United Nations Tribunal awarded Dhaka 19,467 square kilometer sea area of Bay of Bengal. And in fact, India could have chosen not to abide by the verdict of the United Nations Tribunal, as has been done by various countries including China and USA. India, however, chose to ignore the disadvantages in the interest of building a friendly and a solid relationship with Bangladesh. So now you can compare the land dispute which India has with other neighbors, for example Pakistan, China, and even right now Nepal. Both these disputes were resolved amicably and peacefully. Apart from border management, a number of agreements related to security cooperation have been signed between both the countries. For example, the Coordinated Border Management Plan was signed in 2011, which aims to facilitate the joint efforts by the border guarding forces of both the countries. We know that in case of India, border security forces guard our borders with Bangladesh. And similarly, on their side, there is a border guarding force. And so to facilitate collaboration and coordination, this plan was signed, which is still in force. Then, Bangladesh played a key role. And this might come as a surprise, but Bangladesh played a very important role in resolution of northeastern insurgency. Now, the government before Sheikh Hasina actively supported the northeastern insurgency. And as soon as the current regime came into power, Bangladesh cooperated with India in sorting out security issues. We know that India's northeastern region had been plagued by insurgency for a number of years, and many insurgent leaders took shelter in Bangladesh earlier. And so, after the improvements started taking place in India's Bangladesh relations, Bangladesh handed over these leaders and shut down their training camps. Prominent people who were handed over by Bangladesh to India are Ranjan Daimari, who was a founder-in-chief of National Democratic Front of Bodoland, and Mr. Anup Chetia, who was the leader of United Liberation Front of Assam, or ULFA. So you can see that as far as the security and border management issues are concerned, there has been quite a high level of trust between these two nations. Then, since most rivers flowing from India to Bangladesh originate in Himalaya, of course, sharing of river water is an important aspect of bilateral relation between India and Bangladesh. And India and Bangladesh share 55 common rivers. And so, a bilateral joint rivers commission is working since June 1972 to sort out issues. Also, since Ganga is an important river for both India and Bangladesh, a separate treaty was signed in 1996 to enable the proper sharing of waters of river Ganga. Under this mechanism, a regular meeting is held between the officials of India and Bangladesh. Then moving on to trade and investment. Now, it is redundant to mention that bilateral trade between India and Bangladesh has grown steadily over the last decade. But an important aspect of this relationship is how India facilitates Bangladesh's good in our country by providing duty-free, quota-free access to Bangladesh on all products except tobacco and alcohol. Then apart from that, India has financially assisted Bangladesh many times. For example, India has extended 3 lines of credits to Bangladesh in last 7 years, amounting to a whopping $8 billion. Now, cooperation in power sector has become one of the hallmarks of India-Bangladesh relations. So, apart from importing power, India and Bangladesh are jointly involved in a lot of energy projects as well. For example, India has agreed to construct India-Bangladesh Friendship Pipeline, which will connect Siliguri to Parbatipur for supply of diesel to Bangladesh from Numaligarh Refinery Limited. And then finally, let us talk about the connectivity. So connectivity, as we know, is connectivity of land with rail and roadways, and then overseas and rivers, that is inland and coastal connectivity. So if we talk about railway connectivity, we have a regular railway service known by the name of Maitri Express. Then if we talk about land borders, we have a lot of land customs stations, for example Petrapol, Benapol border and various others. Similarly, there is a regular bus service between Kolkata, Dhaka, Shillong, Dhaka and Agartala, Kolkata via Dhaka. Apart from that, if we talk about road connectivity, we have BBIN agreement, which has the potential to significantly boost the connectivity by road. Then of course, aviation sector is definitely there with more than 100 flights operating weekly between India and Bangladesh. So now you can understand that how comprehensive the bilateral relation between India and Bangladesh is. And here we have not discussed the cultural and the lingual linkage provided by the Bengali language. An interesting fact is that the national anthem of Bangladesh, which is Sonar Bangla, was written by Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. Of course, we know that India's own national anthem, Jana Gana Man, was also written by the same person. So there are other aspects to this strong bilateral relation as well. But there are thorny issues between India and Bangladesh, which need to be sorted out before they go out of hand. And of course, just like any other bilateral relation, China factor is an important player in this one also. Now, first and foremost is that China is Bangladesh's main or major arms supplier as well as investor, just like it is in case of Pakistan also. If we talk about last 10 years, then over 75% of the total arms have been provided by China. Apart from that, the relationship with China has bipartisan support in Bangladesh. So we know that there are two major parties in Bangladesh. One of them is ruling, another one is opposition. In case of India, the support is derived majorly from the current ruling party or the Awami League. But in case of China, the support is extended from both the parties, and so the indications are that future of China-Bangladesh relationship is quite stronger as compared to India. Then as far as security and border management is concerned, not all is well. We know that Rohingya refugees are settled in India in large numbers, and that has created a lot of internal problems for our country. And so a lot of times the central government has talked about fast repatriation of Rohingya refugees to Myanmar. Now the problem is that Myanmar is not going to accept these Rohingya refugees. And so whenever we talk about repatriation of these people, it basically means sending them back to Bangladesh. And so that has created a lot of trouble in our bilateral relationships. And then we have Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, which was a major turning point in relationship of India with that of Bangladesh. We know that the act categorizes people coming from religious minorities from 3 countries, that is Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. Now, inclusion of Bangladesh as a source of origin for the people who shall be treated as persecuted minority has really irked Bangladesh, because Bangladesh takes pride in its secular credentials, and by including their name along with Pakistan and Afghanistan, a national legislation of India has shown Bangladesh in bad light, and so that has created a lot of problem. Then we have a matter of NRC, which is a process to identify illegal migrants in the border state of Assam. The idea is to identify illegal immigrants and then repatriate them to the source region. Of course, majority of illegal immigrants in state of Assam have come from Bangladesh. We know that on multiple occasions, Indian government has tried to assuage the doubts raised by Bangladesh that the process of National Register of Citizens is not going to impact Bangladesh, but it remains to be seen that once the identification is complete, what will happen to these identified illegal immigrants. Then if we talk about sharing of river waters, not all is well over here as well. we have issue of Teesta river water. Teesta, which is a very long Himalayan river which flows through Indian states of Sikkim and West Bengal and then finally goes into Bangladesh. Now the issue of Teesta water could not be solved because of non-cooperation of West Bengal government. We all know that water is a state subject in India. Hence, for a bilateral agreement on the sharing of Teesta waters, the support of West Bengal government would also be needed. But again, a Chinese factor has come into play over here as well. As no agreement has taken place on the sharing of Teesta river water, Bangladesh government has now decided to go for an alternative. It wants to manage the water of its side by building a reservoir so that it could use it in an optimum manner and throughout the year. And for this, Dhaka has entered into an agreement with Beijing for a project of over $1 billion, in which China is going to financially and technically assist Bangladesh to set up dam, and that is going to create a problem for India. So from the perspective of mains examination, and to write an answer which is well diversified, you need to analyze bilateral relations from a lot of perspectives. And so, in case of India and Bangladesh, we had a discussion on security, border management, sharing of river water, bilateral trade and investment, financial assistance, energy cooperation and connectivity. And then at the same time, we also discussed respective issues being faced in all these aspects. Keep these things in mind while going into mains examination. Let's now move on to the next news. The next article of discussion appears on page number 7, Hazardous Ideas for the Himalayas. Now, according to the author, by planning more and more hydropower projects, India and China are placing the region at a great risk. Now, we know that hydroelectricity or the electricity produced by hydropower or the moving water has been quite an important pillar of our energy security since the time of independence. And India has laid significant amount of its dependence as far as power consumption and production is concerned on hydro projects. Now, since most of the rivers flowing in India and majority of rivers flowing in China originate very near or on the Himalayas, and hence quite large hydropower projects and their reservoirs or dams are situated in quite fragile region of Himalayas. And the author is specially concerned about the 14th five-year plan of China, in which they have announced a major hydropower project on Yarlung-Zanbo River. And in this context, author has tried to highlight two of the major negative consequences of these hydroelectric projects. But in this discussion, we are just not going to limit ourselves to those two demerits, but rather we are going to understand both merits as well as demerits of hydroelectric projects. So if you look at the statistics talking about the power sector in India, you can see that around 14% of the overall power currently is derived from hydroelectric projects. Of course, the majority comes from coal, and the share of renewable energy is also continuously increasing. So, of course, it goes on to show that hydroelectric projects must have a lot of merits, starting with its renewable nature. Now, it is not categorized as renewable energy source. In India, the categorization which deals with hydropower is a small hydropower projects, but not the mega ones. But still, hydropower is completely renewable, which means it will never run out unless the water stops flowing itself. As a result, hydropower projects are built to last for a very, very long time, and the water which flows into them and the water which flows out of them has no change or very minimal change as far as the quality of the water for human consumption is concerned. So that is a very good thing about hydroelectric projects. Then, of course, they are quite emission free. The creation of hydroelectricity does not releases any emissions into atmosphere. And so that is also very big advantage, because if you compare this to other currently important sources of power, which is coal, the hydroelectric projects have a lot of advantage. Then hydroelectric projects are quite reliable as well as adjustable. Now, when we talk about reliability, it is by far the most reliable renewable energy available in the world. Now, if you compare this with other renewable sources, for example, solar and wind, so when the sun goes down or when the wind dies down, you cannot produce electricity from these sources. But water usually has a constant and a steady flow 24/7, especially if that is a river which originates from a glacier in a Himalayan region. Then, all the hydroelectric projects creates reservoirs because they are built on a dam. Now there are a lot of other advantages. For example, creation of reservoirs leads to formation of canals, which then can be used for transport or for irrigating a large swath of land, and then these dams become tourist hotspot, attracting a lot of tourists, and so it has a multiplier effect. And then finally, one of the biggest advantages of hydroelectric projects is that they lead to development of the overall area. Of course, the hydroelectric projects are very large projects which then require large settlements of the authority which is managing the hydroelectric project. But apart from that, a lot of equipment which is very large in size, for example motors, turbines, have to be shifted to the location where the project is situated. And to transport these equipments, we need bigger highways, stronger roads going up to these areas. And since these areas are quite remote locations, it leads to infrastructural creation in those localities. But having said that, it has its own fair share of demerits as well. Starting with their higher initial cost. Dams are extremely expensive to build and must be built to a very high standard because they need to be pretty strong. And so, this high cost of dam construction means that they must operate for many decades to become profitable. But there is a problem. As they become old, there are a lot of issues which crop up. The matter of siltation. As the river water continuously flows through the dam gates, it brings along with it a lot of silt or various other sediments which are deposited in the reservoir itself, reducing the capacity of the power plant itself. Because if this is the dam and if continuously it's bringing a lot of silt will deposit through years and it will significantly reduce the capacity of the dam to hold water. And so it needs to be cleaned continuously, which is a very big investment or an expenditure on the managing authority. Then creation of dam means flooding of large areas of land, which then eventually implies massive relocation and resettlement. So people who were living in villages and towns that will eventually become flooded must move out, and this means that they lose their farms, their businesses, their whole ecosystem. And this is one of the major contentions in India behind slow pace of hydroelectric projects. Then we have already seen that it is emission free. Emission in terms of polluting gases which come out of that project. But if you look in the longer term, it is not correct. Even hydroelectric projects have their fair share of emissions, which is mainly due to the decomposition. So all the flora which is submerged due to the reservoir begins to decompose, and when they decompose they release large quantities of carbon along with methane, leading to emissions of greenhouse gases from these water bodies. Then the impact on biodiversity is not very difficult to think of. Submergence with water, and that is a very deep water, alters the ecology, and creation of dams on the rivers fragments the biodiversity of the river. And so, for example, this prevents fishes from reaching their breeding ground, which in turn affects any animal that relies on those fish for food. Apart from that, as the water stops flowing, riverside habitats begin to disappear. This can even remove animals from accessing their water. And so it alters the ecology, and it has quite a negative impact on the biodiversity of the region. And then finally, let us now talk about the disaster risk, which is the focus of today's article. Now, dams may be very strong, but a possibility of failure of dams can never be denied. And once that happens, it creates havoc in the downstream region of the river. Apart from that, flood management is also a very difficult task. You need to keep the capacity of the storage in mind, the amount of rainfall and the running water which is coming in, and especially in India, this dam management is very poor. Usually a lot of time is wasted before the gates are opened, and what it does is that when the gates are opened, the dam is already filled up to its capacity, which leads to flood-like situation or even floods in downstream regions. And then finally, a recent connection between earthquakes and big dams and reservoirs. Now we know that dams and large reservoirs are generally constructed in mountainous regions, and so they are also the areas of high seismicity. At the same time, we also know that earthquakes generally originate in faults, the cracks on the Earth's crust. And if these dams are located quite near to the active faults, which are very common in case of Himalayas, so what these dams do is that they create excessive water pressure in the micro cracks, which ultimately lead up to the faults, which then facilitates larger earthquakes or swarms of smaller earthquakes. And this has been established in many studies, not only in the world but also in India. According to the author, construction of more and more hydroelectric projects is a mad rush and it is not sustainable. So it is worth noting that there are many pros as well as cons of hydroelectric projects. There is no denying the fact that it has its own consequences. However, when you compare it to the threat of climate change, it is undoubtedly better than any of the fossil fuel related energy. Let us now move on to the next article. The next news which we have taken for today's discussion is US court rejects bail plea filed by Tahawwur Rana, which appears on page number 1. So a US court has rejected the bail plea of this person who is a key accused in 26/11 Mumbai terror attack and is currently lodged in a Los Angeles prison. Now we know that 2008 Mumbai terror attacks were a series of terrorist attacks that took place in November 2008. When 10 members of Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is an extremist organization, carried out 12 coordinated shooting and bombing attacks lasting 4 days across Mumbai. And that was a watershed moment in India's security paradigm because it brought about a lot of significant changes which are very, very important from the perspective of UPSC examination. For example, additional responsibilities were given to Indian Coast Guard. A new agency on the lines of FBI was created, which is known by the name of National Investigation Agency. Then a lot of amendments were brought to UAPA, and then various other steps have been taken which include international organizations, all of which can be categorized as a response to 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. And so let us now discuss them one by one. Now we know that all the terrorists came in a boat, entered into our territorial waters without any scrutiny. And so, since 2008, there is an increased emphasis on surveillance, intelligence gathering and information sharing amongst various stakeholders of our coastal security. For example, in 2009, Indian Coast Guard was additionally designated as the authority responsible for coastal security in territorial waters, including areas to be patrolled by the coastal police. Before 2008 Mumbai terror attack, territorial waters were under the complete jurisdiction of coastal police. Apart from that, the Indian Coast Guard has also been made responsible for overall coordination between central and state agencies in matters relating to coastal security. Then immediately aftermath of Mumbai terror attacks, a new agency was created known by the name of NIA, which is an acronym for National Investigation Agency. Now it is important to note over here is that it has a statutory backing created through an act of the same name, the National Investigating Agency Act of 2008. The act has constituted an investigation agency at the national level to investigate and prosecute offences affecting the sovereignty, security and integrity of India, security of state, friendly relation with foreign states and offences under acts enacted to implement international treaties, agreements, conventions and resolutions of the United Nations. The Act provides for scheduled offences, namely offences committed under any legislations provided in the schedule to NIA. So what are the acts which have been provided under the schedules of NIA? There are a number of legislation under the schedule of NIA, the list of which can be found in today's PDF, but they all deal with the matters of internal security. For example, Atomic Energy Act 1962, Suppression of Unlawful Acts, the Weapons of Mass Destruction and Their Delivery Systems, Act 2005. So all these acts have been included into the schedule of NIA, and any offences conducted under this act shall be investigated and henceforth prosecuted by NIA. Then amendments to UAPA or Unlawful Activity Prevention Act 1967 also carried out. Although this was done in 2019, but this has been deliberated for over a period of 10 years. For example, earlier, Chapter 6 of UAPA only talked about terrorist organizations and it had no mention to terrorist individuals. And so the amendment has included the individuals as well, which can now be designated as terrorists. The amendment has also created a new schedule which will contain the names of these terrorists designated under UAPA 2019. Then, the officers of NIA have been included as designated authority under UAPA, which was not the case earlier, and which shows the increasing power of NIA as far as matters related with terrorism is concerned. Then, with the amendment, the investigative powers have been given to various officials serving in NIA. An International Convention for Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism 2005 has been added in the second schedule of UAPA. Then various other steps taken individually have bolstered India's defense against terrorism, especially the ones originating in oceans or the seas. For example, India has joined Indian Ocean Commission as observer in 2020, which is a push for greater salience in the whole Indian Ocean region, including Western or African Indian Ocean. Of course, this step is targeted towards piracy, but nonetheless, it is for defending India's integrity. Then, India has established Information Fusion Center at Gurugram, which is jointly administered by Indian Navy and Indian Coast Guard, and this has been done to increase the coordination between these two separate pillars of India's coastal defense in order to forestall any further attack on our major cities. This would ensure that entire region is benefited by mutual collaboration as well as exchange of information between these two premium organizations. Then we know that Project Mausam has been launched to strengthen ties of India with Indian Ocean littoral countries. And then finally, Indian Prime Minister proposed an Indian Pacific Oceans initiative under the aegis of East Asia Summit to further enhance maritime security in the region. If we talk about the syllabus of mains examination, internal security is an important aspect of GS paper 3, and in that, steps taken by India to counter terrorism and especially the coastal terrorism become very important, and in that respect, steps taken to give enhanced power to Indian Coast Guard, creation of National Investigation Agency and amendments made to UAPA Act of 1967 are very important. Let us now move on to the next news. The next article is The Roots of Agriculture Crisis Run Deep. And this article has appeared in the context of recent farmers' protest over the 3 Farm Acts. And this article highlights that the farmers and the government could come to an amicable agreement over the recent issue. But it will only be a temporary situation. Presently, the agriculture sector is staring at agrarian crisis, and hence the government would need to find a long-term sustainable solution to address this problem. And hence in this regard, we are going to understand 3 main factors behind poor performance of India's agriculture sector. Now here you need to understand that agriculture sector accounts for only 16% of India's gross domestic product. Yet it accounts for around 45% of India's workforce, and hence you can easily see that overall development of agriculture sector is quite critical for ensuring inclusive and sustainable development. Now, a major boost to India's agriculture sector was given in Green Revolution in 1970s, which indeed enhanced the food production and ensured food security. However, the performance of agriculture sector is quite poor on account of 3 main factors, that is, rising input costs, decline in productivity, and lower price realization. Let us now discuss them one by one, starting with rising input costs. Now we know that Green Revolution has made Indian agriculture highly input intensive, leading to higher economic costs. And it has also resulted in lower environmental sustainability. Higher input cost mainly on account of high yielding variety seeds which required a lot of inputs, and unsustainable use of groundwater, fertilizer, pesticide has left our soil and water depleted. And along with that, the labor costs are also rising. And so when all these factors, overuse of water, fertilizer, pesticide, in combination with groundwater depletion and loss of soil fertility, has had a long-term adverse impact on India's agriculture. So it's just not rising input costs, but also India's agriculture is seeing decline in productivity. We know that Indian agriculture and its production is mainly dominated by rice and wheat. But if you compare the yield of rice and wheat in India to that of USA and China, India's productivity is much lower. Also, the fact that there is very minimal diversification of Indian agriculture, which means that we don't grow as much oil seeds and pulses, along with there is less emphasis on horticulture, animal husbandry and sericulture, has resulted in hindrances in India's aim to double the income of the farmers. For example, Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income has calculated that an increase in agriculture diversification by 1 hectare can fetch an additional annual income of 80,000 rupees for the farmers. And then finally, even after keeping in account rising input costs and decline in productivity, whatever the farmer grows, the price of that production is not realized, and that is actually very low. We know that APMC regime in India is highly restrictive, fragmented, and it is inclined in favor of trader as compared to farmer. Some of these problems include lack of freedom to farmers to sell their produce anywhere within India. There is a mandi system. You grow your farms within that mandi's area, and so you have to go to that particular mandi to sell your produce. Domination of large number of middlemen and intermediaries sitting in mandi who do not add any value to the product. Lower marketable surplus of small and marginal farmers, which is mainly because of low yield. Higher price volatility, lack of cold chain infrastructure, which then leads to post-harvest losses. So on account of these factors, farmers realize only 25 to 40% of the prices paid by the consumers. So all these aspects clearly highlight that enhancing agricultural production alone will not lead to enhancement in income levels of farmers. And in order to double income levels of farmers, agriculture should be treated as an enterprise with focus on 3 aspects: reducing input costs instead of rising, enhancing the productivity instead of decline, and increasing the price realization instead of lowering it. So these are the steps which the government need to take in order to resolve long-standing issues facing farmers.